So, you want to last 16 years in the NFL, but you're a punter, which is often seen as chopped liver and the first on the chopping block when it comes to making cuts. So in order to do this, you have to be able to do something very special. Well, only one man in the history of the game has played as many games for one team as the man you're watching punt right now, and that man's name is Sam Koch. And for the Baltimore fans out there, I know you're stroking yourselves because Sam is the man in Baltimore and everybody and their mothers love him. So how does he do it? How is he able to keep going year after year and getting his contract renewed so consistently? First, the obvious. He is consistent. Not just punt to punt, not just game to game, but year to year. His lowest average came as a rookie with just 43 yards per punt, but his highest average was in the 2018 season with 47.4 yards per punt. This is important because the last thing coaches ever want to have to do is worry about what's going to happen on this crucial play. On top of this, as a true veteran, he's able to consistently ensure that there are no critical errors on his team. Across 254 games and over a whopping 1,100 punts, there have only been 3 touchdowns allowed and only 7 blocks. That means that less than 0.1% of his total plays have ended in disaster. On top of this, during his 16 years in the NFL, teams have only averaged around 8 yards per punt return when they get the chance to return one. This leads to Sam having a career net average of almost 40 yards per punt, making him an insanely efficient punter in a ever-growing cutthroat league. A good complement to his efficiency, and something I like to talk about with Sam, is that he specializes in not outkicking his coverage. His longest punts are usually only in the high 50s, which leads to his coverage teams being able to put themselves in good positions to make plays, and any punts that end up on the stat sheet longer than that usually get there on the ground. And when it comes to putting punts on the ground, no one does it better than Sam. While most punters' strategy is to kick the ball as far and as high as possible, Sam has been the lone man when it comes to revolutionizing punting in the NFL. His style completely changes how returners have to think and move when they line up. Do they stand at 40 yards and risk him bombing a 60-yarder over their heads? Do they stand at 50 yards and risk having to sprint forward to catch a fading knuckleball that lands at 35? Do they line up directly in front of him and try to catch any sort of spiraling punt with its limited array of angles it can leave his body from? Or do they line up in the middle of the field to ensure they have a fair chance at catching whatever ball leaves Sam's foot? Oh yeah, and they only have a couple seconds to decide this while running onto the field. Meanwhile, the NFL vet already has his punt in his head that he's going to do regardless. So, while you may not think it's a big deal for punters to do stuff like this, the mind games he plays with returners definitely are a factor in his longevity, and quite frankly, the more the returner has to think about how he's going to field the ball, the less he's thinking about putting up a good return right after it. So let's talk about some of the punts that Sam has done in this year alone. First, he hits his spirals, left and right. It's a classic for punters, including Sam, and while he's innovated the game, he hasn't thrown out the OGs that got him into it. He brings them out much more frequently than Sanchez does, and by doing so, he actually unlocks a whole different part of his punting game we'll talk about later. But most of Cook's spirals are between 48 and 60 yards in the air with good direction, so often when he kicks them, the returners have to flip their hips and run back to go chase the ball so they can get their feet set beneath them and try to set up a return. Over the years, he's mastered this ball, so he can easily put it within a couple yards of the sideline without much thought, and this greatly limits returners' options when trying to field the punt. They pretty much have 2 choices. They can either bounce it back to the middle of the field, or catch it and just try to run straight down the sideline. But this gives his coverage unit a breather because now all they have to do is pincer in from the field side and they can take a shot on the returner no matter which way he goes because there's no open lane. This is how he's been able to stop not only touchdowns but also greatly limit the amount of big returns that have been put up on him for like 30 or plus yards that can be absolutely devastating to a team. His next style is nasty. Similar to Rigoberto Sanchez, he holds his ball down and slightly to the right with the ball angled inside back at him. This punt is pure freaking heat for Cook, because out of this one stance, he can completely control the field and where that ball goes. He's hit it down the middle, he's hit it to the right, he's hit it to the left, all out of the exact same drop, ball position, and steps. While Rigo had different styles to have this effect, Cook is able to do it effectively and not let the returner move until after the ball is kicked just out of this one style. The only way a returner can start to drift one direction or the other is if he has that guttural returner instinct or Cook walks to the left. Regardless, this punting style sets up a dangerous mid-game for Cook where he can control the whole field with a ball that will go 38 to 51 yards and anywhere, any direction on the field. He also has some different punts that you can see out of this look. Like against the Bengals, he hits the ball a little bit flatter, and he's kicking the ball straight. But due to the curve of the ball, the returner is going to be constantly drifting to the left and even forces this mean fair catch against the Bengals. To complement this punting style, he also has a limited series of short punts that he'll do where he's looking to get the ball on the ground. This style of punting was highlighted in the NFL documentary on Sam Koch, boomerangs, knuckleballs, and hooks. The premise behind these is to force that Peter call out of the returner and get that ball on the ground and rolling forward. Because the best way to ensure there's no big punt return is to make sure the returner never gets a hold of the ball. And while the conventional thought process has been to kick it out of bounds, we're coming to see that kicking the ball in a weird way so the returners just straight up don't want to field it is also an effective strategy. But between these three styles, returners have to line up every punt and have no clue where that ball is going to go, what it's going to look like in the air, or what Cook is going to be doing. All these things included with the fact that he's a complete technician and a master of his craft have gone into Sam Koch's incredible 16-year legacy in the NFL. Anyway, hope you guys enjoy, and if you have a punter you want to see next, leave it in the comments. Hope you guys are having a good day, and peace.
And that's McLeod